The pen felt heavy in my hand. Heavier than it should have been for something so small. My husband Caleb Wright sat beside me at the kitchen table, his fingers gently covering mine as I hesitated over the final signature line. 3 properties. 4 rental apartments. The farmland my mother spent 30 years paying for. All of it about to become his. We're one person now, Caleb whispered, his breath warm against my ear. What's yours is mine, what's mine is yours. That's what marriage means. Welcome to Revenge Sanity, where real-life stories expose betrayal, pain, and unexpected twists. I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. The lawyer across from us cleared his throat. He'd already asked me twice if I was sure. Twice I'd said yes. Now I signed my name for the last time, and everything my mother left me became Caleb's legal property. That night, Caleb held me close and promised we'd build our future together. He kissed my forehead and called me his partner, his equal, his everything. I fell asleep feeling safe. I was a fool. Within 3 months, I wouldn't recognize my own life. Within 6 months, my own neighbors would cross the street to avoid me. Within a year, I'd become the villain in a story I didn't even know was being written. But that night I still believed in us. The first sign came on a Tuesday morning at the grocery store. Mrs. Patterson, who'd known me since I was 12, looked right through me. I smiled and waved. She turned her cart around and walked the other direction. My hand hung in the air, stupid and confused. Maybe she didn't see me, I told myself. But then it happened again. And again. My cousin Bridget showed up at my door unannounced. Something she never did. She stood on the porch fidgeting with her purse strap, eyes searching my face like she was looking for something broken. "Are you okay?" she asked carefully. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? She bit her lip. "People are saying things. About you and Caleb. About your marriage." My stomach dropped. "What things?" "Just check on yourself, okay? Make sure you're really okay." She left before I could ask more. I stood in the doorway feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me, but I couldn't figure out which direction was up anymore. That Sunday at church, the whispers started. I heard my name behind cupped hands. Saw heads lean together as I passed. One woman actually pulled her daughter away from me like I carried some disease. I went home shaking. When I asked Caleb what was happening, he pulled me into a hug. "People are just jealous," he said. "Don't worry about it." But I was worried, 'cause something was very, very wrong. 2 weeks later, I learned what everyone was saying about me. A former friend finally had the courage to tell me the truth. We met at a coffee shop outside town where no one knew us. "They're saying you're unstable," she said quietly, hands wrapped around her mug. "That you can't handle money. That Caleb had to take over everything because you were making bad decisions." The coffee shop spun around me. "What? That's insane. I never." "They're saying you begged him to manage the properties because you couldn't cope. That you're controlling and emotionally manipulative. That he's a saint for putting up with you." Every word was a knife. "Who's saying this?" "Caleb." The name hung between us like poison. "He's been telling people for months. Church events, community meetings, everywhere. He says it so sadly, like he's this devoted husband carrying a terrible burden." I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. My own husband was destroying me with lies, and he'd been doing it for months while I slept beside him every night. "There's more," she continued. "He says you're paranoid now. That you accuse him of things. So when people hear you defending yourself, they think it's just proof he's right." It was perfect. Horrible and perfect. Every word I said to defend myself would only confirm his story. I was trapped in a narrative I didn't write, playing a role I never auditioned for. The villain. He'd made me the villain. I started paying attention. Really watching. That's when I noticed Naomi Wright coming around more often. Caleb's older sister had always been distant with me, polite but cold. Now she was everywhere, smiling that thin smile that never reached her eyes. "Just helping out," she'd say. touching Caleb's shoulder like they shared secrets I wasn't part of. One afternoon, I drove past one of my rental properties, the blue house on Riverside Avenue that I'd painted myself 5 years ago. Naomi's car sat in the driveway, parked and knocked. She answered wearing slippers, comfortable and settled. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Oh, didn't Caleb tell you? I'm staying here temporarily while my place is being renovated. This is my house." Her smile sharpened. "Actually, it's Caleb's house now. And he's generous enough to help family when we need it." She closed the door in my face. Called Caleb immediately. He sighed like I was being unreasonable. She needed a place to stay. What was I supposed to do, say no to my own sister? "You're being selfish. It's my property." "No," he said coldly. "It's legally mine. And I'm allowed to help my family." That night I couldn't sleep. I started going through papers, documents, anything I could find. That's when I discovered the sale record. One of the apartments had been sold 8 months ago. The money went into an account I didn't have access to. "For Naomi's business venture," the note said. My mother's property, sold to fund his sister's dreams. The family dinner was Naomi's idea. "We need to clear the air," she'd told Caleb. I should have known it was a trap. Caleb's parents were there, his brother, Naomi, and her husband. I'd cooked for hours, trying to be the perfect wife, still believing I could fix whatever was breaking. Halfway through dessert, Caleb's voice cut through the conversation. "I need to say something." Everyone looked at him. He had this expression, hurt and brave at the same time, like he was about to confess something painful. "I've tried to be patient," he began. "I've tried to understand. But I can't keep pretending everything's okay." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "She wants me to give everything back," he said, gesturing at me like I was a stranger. "All the properties I've worked so hard to maintain. She says they're hers, that I stole them. She wants to throw me out of my own marriage." "What?" The word barely escaped my throat. "That's not." "See," Naomi interrupted, leaning forward. "This is what he deals with. Constant accusations. Paranoia." "I never said that." My voice rose, desperate. "I just asked why he sold my apartment without telling me." Caleb's mother shook her head sadly. "Dear, they're his properties now. He doesn't need permission." "But they were mine." The silence that followed was crushing. Everyone stared at me like I was proving every lie Caleb had told. His father actually looked disgusted. I sat there, trapped in my own dining room, and realized the truth. I'd already lost. They'd decided who I was long before this dinner. Nothing I said would matter. I was the villain. And villains don't get believed. I started having trouble sleeping. Some nights I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and find Caleb's side of the bed empty. He'd be downstairs on his phone, speaking in low voices that stopped whenever I appeared. "Work stuff," he'd say. Always work stuff. One Thursday night, I pretended to be asleep when he slipped out of bed. I waited 10 minutes, then crept to the top of the stairs. His voice drifted up from the kitchen. "She's completely isolated now." Naomi's voice came through the speakerphone. "No one believes her anymore." My hand gripped the railing. "Perfect," Caleb replied. "The lawyer says as long as she looks unstable, we're protected. Even if she tries to fight back, who's going to take her seriously?" Naomi laughed, and the sound was like glass breaking inside my chest. "She already looks crazy, walking around town trying to explain herself to anyone who'll listen. It's actually sad." "Give it a few more months," Caleb said. "Then we can move forward with the next phase." "What about the farmland?" "Already have a buyer interested. Just need to wait for the right time." I must have made a sound because suddenly Caleb was standing at the bottom of the stairs, phone in hand, staring up at me. For 3 seconds we just looked at each other. Then he smiled. "Bad dream?" he asked. I turned and walked back to the bedroom. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't fall apart like he expected. Something inside me had died listening to that conversation. But something else was being born. Something cold and clear and determined. They'd underestimated me. That was their first real mistake. The next morning I made breakfast like always. Caleb watched me carefully, waiting for an explosion that never came. I poured his coffee and asked about his day. He looked confused but relieved. "Finally coming to your senses?" he asked. I just smiled. From that day forward I stopped defending myself. Stopped arguing. Stopped trying to convince people of the truth. Every time Caleb told a lie, I stayed silent. Every time Naomi made a snide comment, I nodded politely. They thought I'd given up. They thought they'd won. They were wrong. Instead, I started watching everything. I kept a notebook hidden in my car. Every conversation, every transaction, every property detail I could remember. I wrote down dates and names and the exact words people used. I documented everything they thought I was too broken to notice. Caleb grew confident in my silence. He got sloppy. Started leaving papers around. Having phone calls in the next room instead of the next floor. Naomi stopped pretending to be nice, her mask slipping more each day. And I learned that most of my properties had hidden problems now. Deferred maintenance, unhappy tenants, mounting complaints. I learned that Caleb had no idea how to actually manage real estate. He'd assumed it was easy, that ownership was the same as competence. I learned that Naomi's business was failing, that the money from my apartment was gone, that she was already asking for more. Most importantly, I learned that their alliance was fragile. Built on greed and lies, it would crack the moment pressure was applied. I just needed to find the right pressure point. Caleb owned the properties on paper, but I'd built the relationships that made them valuable. That was the piece they'd overlooked. For 7 years, I'd been the one who remembered tenant birthdays. I'd helped fix leaky faucets at midnight, brought soup when someone was sick, gave extensions when someone lost their job. I knew their kids' names and their parents' health problems. And showed up. Caleb knew none of them. He just collected rent. So I started making phone calls. Nothing dramatic. Just checking in. "Hey, how have things been?" Ask. "Is Caleb taking care of that water pressure issue?" Simple questions that revealed complicated truths. The tenants started calling me instead of him. Old Mrs. Chen. No, Mrs. Wallace, who'd lived in the corner apartment for 12 years, said the heat hadn't worked in 2 weeks and Caleb kept saying he'd handle it. Mr. Foster, who ran the hardware store and rented my commercial space, mentioned that Caleb had raised the rent without warning, something I'd never have done. I didn't tell them to stop paying. Didn't encourage rebellion. Just listened. And occasionally I'd mention the name of a good contractor, or suggest they document their complaints in writing, or remind them of their tenant rights. Information is power. And I was gathering both. I also reached out to the community leaders I'd worked with for years. The church committee I'd served on. The business association I'd helped start. These were people who'd known me long before Caleb's lies, even if they'd been confused by his stories. I didn't complain or accuse. I just reconnected. Asked about their projects. Offered advice when asked. Showed up to meetings. Reminded them without saying it directly who I actually was. Slowly, carefully, I was rebuilding the foundation they tried to destroy. Mrs. Wallace from church cornered me after service one Sunday. She'd been one of the people avoiding me for months. Now she looked troubled. "I need to ask you something," she said. "And I need you to be honest. Always. Did you really have a breakdown? Did you actually ask Caleb to take over everything?" I could have screamed. Could have cried. Could have finally told someone the full truth. Instead, I took a breath and chose my words carefully. "I signed my properties over to him because I trusted him," I said quietly. "I thought marriage meant partnership. I was wrong about what kind of man he was." Her eyes widened. "So he's been lying. I can't control what Caleb says. I can only control what I do. And I never had a breakdown, never begged him for anything, never made the choices he's described. But I understand if people believe him. He's very convincing." She touched my arm. Oh honey, I'm so sorry. I should have asked you directly. It's okay. Really. But it wasn't okay, and she knew it. That night she called 3 friends. Those friends called others. Not to gossip, to question. To reconsider. To look at Caleb's stories with fresh eyes. I did this conversation over and over. One person at a time. Never angry, never desperate. Just calm truth spoken to people who were starting to notice the cracks. Because Caleb's stories were breaking down. He'd told too many versions, added too many details that didn't quite fit. Someone would mention something he'd said in January, and it would contradict what he'd said in April. The lies were collapsing under their own weight. People started watching him more carefully, listening differently, asking questions. And Caleb didn't notice until it was too late. The community business meeting was routine. Local property owners discussing neighborhood improvements. I attended because I always had, even though technically I own nothing anymore. Caleb came too, newly confident in his role as property holder. Someone asked about the Riverside renovations. My old plan to update the rental units and raise property values for everyone on the block. I'd presented the whole proposal a year ago. So Caleb, are you moving forward with those plans? Mr. Hughes asked. Caleb froze. He had no idea what plans they were talking about. I'm reassessing the situation, he stammered. Reassessing. But you had the whole timeline laid out. The contractors, the budget, everything. Things change, Caleb said weakly. I sat 3 chairs away, silent, watching. What about the water damage in Building C? Someone else asked. Has that been fixed? I'm handling it. It's been 4 months. These things take time. One evening I drove past the blue house on Riverside Avenue. Paint was peeling. The garden I'd maintained was overgrown. A for rent sign hung crooked in the window. Should have made me sad. Instead, I felt nothing but relief that it wasn't my burden anymore. I'd lost the properties but kept my soul. Caleb had the opposite outcome. I started over with nothing but my skills and reputation. Slowly, people started approaching me for advice. Mr. Foster asked if I'd help him find a property manager for his store. Mrs. Wallace wanted guidance on investing her retirement money. Old clients who'd worked with me before remembered how reliable I'd been. One thing led to another. I started a small consulting business, helping people manage their properties and investments. Just advice at first, charging modest fees. But word spread. People trusted me in ways they'd never trust Caleb. Within 6 months, I was managing 3 small properties for elderly owners who couldn't handle the work anymore. Within a year, I'd built a portfolio of 10 properties. None of them mine, all of them under my management, generating steady income through consultation fees and management percentages. I was building something new. Something that couldn't be stolen because it was based on who I was, not what I owned. My mother would have been proud. She taught me that character was the only asset that could never be taken from you. I finally understood what she meant. Caleb, meanwhile, was drowning. I heard through the community that he was trying to sell the properties but couldn't find buyers at reasonable prices. The reputation I'd built for those addresses had died with my departure. They were just troubled buildings now, nothing special, worth far less than he'd expected. He'd won the battle for ownership. But I was winning something bigger. A real life built on truth instead of lies. 14 months after I moved out, Caleb showed up at my apartment. He looked terrible, exhausted, older, defeated. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Can we talk? He asked. I let him in, but I didn't offer coffee or comfort. We sat in my small living room, the silence heavy between us. I want to apologize, he said finally, for how things turned out. For the way everything got so complicated. Note what he didn't apologize for. Lying about me. Stealing from me. Destroying my reputation. Helping his sister take what my mother had died to give me. He apologized for how things turned out, like it was all some unfortunate accident instead of calculated cruelty. Okay, I said. That's it. Just okay. What do you want me to say, Caleb? He stopped, struggled. I want us to figure this out. Maybe I could transfer some properties back. We could work together like we should have from the start. I almost laughed. He didn't want to make things right. He wanted me to fix his mess. He wanted my knowledge, my relationships, my competence to save him from his own incompetence. No, I said simply. No. Those properties are yours. You made that very clear. What you do with them is not my problem anymore. But I need help. I don't know how to. You should have thought of that before you made me the villain of your story. He stood up, angry now. I'm trying to apologize. No, you're trying to use me again. There's a difference. He left without another word. I locked the door behind him and felt nothing but relief. Some people don't deserve forgiveness. Some betrayals are too complete. 2 years after I signed those papers, I stood in my office. A real office now with my name on the door, and looked at the list of properties under my management. 23 addresses. None of them mine. All of them thriving under my care. My clients trusted me. My reputation was rebuilt, stronger than before. I'd learned the hardest lesson. You can't protect yourself from betrayal by people you love. You can only choose how you respond when it happens. Caleb had tried to destroy me by taking my properties. He didn't understand that property was never the foundation of who I was. My mother taught me competence, integrity, and resilience. Those were things that couldn't be signed away on legal documents. I heard through the community that Caleb finally sold the last of my mother's properties at a loss. The farmland went to developers who'd give him a fraction of what it was worth. The rental apartments were sold to a corporation that would let them deteriorate. Everything my mother built was gone, scattered to strangers who'd never know the love and work that had gone into creating it. That should have broken me. Maybe a year ago it would have. But now I understood. My mother's real legacy wasn't land or buildings. It was the strength to survive, the wisdom to recognize truth, and the courage to start over when everything falls apart. I carried that legacy in every decision I made, every client I helped, every relationship I built on honesty instead of manipulation. Caleb had the papers. But I had everything that mattered. They say every villain gets what they deserve. But I was never the villain. Despite how hard Caleb tried to write me as one. Villains act from malice and selfishness. I acted from love and trust. Those aren't the same thing, even when they lead to loss. Today I saw Caleb at the bank. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw recognition flash across his face. Not of me, but of what he'd lost by trying to destroy me. I nodded politely and walked past. There was nothing left to say. No dramatic confrontation, no final words of wisdom or revenge. Just two people who'd once promised forever, now strangers sharing space in a bank lobby. That's how most stories really end. Not with explosions or grand revelations, but with quiet acceptance and separate paths. I'm building a good life now. I have friends who value truth. I have work that means something. I have peace that comes from knowing exactly who I am, regardless of what anyone says about me. Caleb has properties on paper and nothing else. No respect, no real relationships, no inner peace. He won the battle and lost the war. Some people ask if I regret signing over my properties. The honest answer is complicated. I regret trusting the wrong person. I regret not seeing the warning signs. I regret the pain and isolation of those awful months when everyone believed his lies. But I don't regret learning who I really am underneath everything I own. I don't regret discovering my own strength. I don't regret becoming someone my mother would recognize and respect. You can steal land. You can rewrite stories. You can turn someone into a villain in everyone's eyes. But you can't steal character. You can't rewrite truth. And you can't keep people blind forever. Eventually masks fall off. Eventually lies collapse. Eventually truth tells itself. And when it does, the real villains are revealed. I gave my husband my property. He made me the villain. But in the end, the story corrected itself. 'Cause good stories always do. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you have a story to tell, you're not alone here.